habitually speaking in the third person means that you're more likely to be wise. Is that true?
It's not a panacea. It's not something that if you do that once, suddenly you're like wise in any way. But there is, uh, it's a old tradition where you have this phenomenon of Iliism, where you talk to yourself in the third person. Not like Donald Trump talks, like, writes about himself on X in the third person sometimes, but rather as a tool in reflection to get outside of this kind of self-focused me type of viewpoint. And it turns out that if you do that, you keep a diary uh, in the third person, at least for a little bit, it will give you a benefit. I'm not sure if how long lasting that is. There is no evidence whether this is something that can stay, let's say, a year later. In fact, I would highly doubt it. I think the main reason it works is because it's very unusual for most people to write in the third person instead of the first person. So at some point, when you move that needle and it becomes habitual for you, so you just like do it naturally, then maybe it loses its benefits. And the weirdest thing is, and that's the paradox that I don't know how to solve yet. So maybe somebody can figure this out next. Is and good luck telling somebody in the heat of the moment who are going through a challenge, you know what? Why don't you just talk to yourself in the third person or look at it from a third person perspective? Because that will be rejected. And quite often it's very hard for ourselves to recognize in the moment we actually need it the most that why don't I just take a step back? Yeah. Quite often it's the opposite. You just want to deal with it now and be done with it. And that's very dangerous. I haven't figured it out yet.
Isn't the third person thing, doesn't it also apply in the complete other end of the spectrum? Like in the movies, media, even in personal life, it's often attributed to people who are very dumb or even like autistic. In the movies and stuff, they always make fun of characters like that. You see like Pingu wants bread and Pingu need money and like guy's name is that.
Right, right,
And people will laugh in comedy movies.
right.
How do you have both?
Well, uh, that goes back to um, that's very good observation, and that goes back to the ideas of a developmental psychologist from the Soviet Union, the beginning of the 20th century. His name was Lev Vygotsky, who suggested that for kids, and that turns out to be in fact the case, uh, uh, early on in a cognitive development, you don't internalize your speech. You just like verbalize everything. You like you start learning how to talk and you just talk instead of having an internal monologue. And at some point in your early childhood, you internalize. And so when you see then in the movies somebody who's portrayed as somebody with maybe limited cognitive abilities, now that's a very, very different phenomenon from the one that we are talking about here, right? Like, so if you already have the capacity to internalize, when you internalize, you don't have to talk about in the third person. You have to think about yourself in the third person. It is all internal, but the vantage point is different. You look at yourself from a different angle. And when you start talking to yourself in the third person, you will be able to activate that angle because, as soon as you start having this internal monologue, many people, not everybody, there are some people who can do that, but most of us create a picture. And in that picture, you are not looking at it through your own eyes. You are in the scene together with others.
Is wisdom worth having?
Yes, absolutely.
Can it be a burden?
Um, uh, Not a burden, but there are some situations which probably don't require much wisdom. Um, you're making love with somebody. You don't really need to start reflecting on the depth of your fallibility. In fact, that may be counterproductive. You at a party with friends, somebody is playing guitar. You enjoy the beautiful song. In that moment, you don't really need wisdom. You just need to be social. You need to be part of the group. Um,
So then what's the point, Igor? Like, I mean, let's take an example, right? Let's just say there's a guy, okay, or you're successful in your career and you have a wife who's like drop dead gorgeous, stunning, your kids are gorgeous, you have, I don't know, you play sports, you're active, healthy body, everything. Is that person wise?
No, and I would doubt that even that person that has everything would not have moments of doubt in their life about something. A good example that I often come back to in my mind is Arnold Schwarzenegger, who throughout his career was very successful in various domains and was always striving for more. And I think the reason why he did it was because there is a sense of uncertainty masked with the bravado of a very strong masculine man. But a lot of people, successful people, they compare themselves to even more successful people. A billionaire who has a beautiful, gorgeous wife and maybe is also healthy, and people love him or her or them, and yet this person will not be comparing themselves quite often to those who are not billionaires, who don't have a beautiful partner, etc., etc. They would be comparing themselves to even more successful ones. And there is always this uncertainty. You may be you may have everything, and then you're crossing the street, somebody cuts you off because even billionaires and beautiful, successful people sometimes cross streets, and people cut you off. And how do you react in that moment? Unexpectedly. And we say, maybe, do I need wisdom for that? Maybe not, but you kind of had to figure out how to assess the situation.
Whatever you do in life or whatever you say, can't somebody turn it into a wisdom? Eat cheese. Yeah, screw it, whatever, tomorrow is not promised. Eat as much cheese as you want. And
Sure.
somebody else is going to be like, no, don't eat the cheese. Put the cheese down because, your body is a temple. And then, what's the saying? Men plant trees whose shade they'll never sit in or whatever.
Well, the issue is that you often have to balance these different aspirations, right? Do you want to pay attention to your body? Do you want to enjoy the moment? Do you want to invest into the future? Do you want to invest into here and now? And many situations in our lives have dilemmas like that. Should I be focusing on myself? Should I be focusing on other people? Should I be helping a friend? Should I be helping my family? Should I be helping or contributing towards the society? Should I take care of my own needs, etc., etc.? And we navigate it throughout our lives. And it doesn't really matter if you're a billionaire, if you're a guru who sells out stadiums, you would still be dealing with those issues on a day-to-day basis. And therefore, when you think of wisdom, going back to this kind of Aristotelian idea that it's about balancing and figuring out what to do, you will always be encountering those situations where you need wisdom, because it is ultimately about figuring out how to navigate these balancing acts between this option and that option.
Do we all agree on what wisdom is?
No,
Why?
there are different perspectives. A good example is Mao, who is revered in China, but many people in North America would not consider to be the wisest person alive. Think about wisdom exemplars from history. Depending on where you are, different people would either be perceived as wise or exemplars of wisdom, or as fools or even despots. For instance, in Russia right now, Stalin is in vogue again, even though we probably would not think of Stalin as somebody who is wise. So on that level, there's quite a bit of disagreement, natural disagreement, because the notion of wisdom is viewed as something that you would put after the fact, post hoc, to somebody that in your particular cultural moment you view as desirable.
Should wisdom be shared?
Absolutely. Tell me more.
Do people just like to hear wisdom or do they plan on applying it?
Usually people want to, the whole point of this is to apply it. The reason why there are so many self-help books, decision making, finance, help with relationships, how to, live in the world after you don't believe in God anymore, etc., 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 how to fight misinformation. All those elements ultimately all about wisdom. It's about how to make better informed decisions, how to make sense of the challenges in the complex, ever-changing world we live in. So I think a lot of people want to apply wisdom, um, but whether they can, it's a different story.
Does it fall on deaf ears?
Um, it can, because everything that's shared is probably context specific. And whether it will apply to your situation or new situation you may be facing is a big question. This is the reason why, for instance, the wisdom of previous generations often does not really get appreciated as much by younger generations, because it seems like they're talking about something entirely different. They lived in a different time period, etc. So both in the delivery and in uh, consume of that shared knowledge, you need to pay attention to how the culture of the situation that they lived in fits the situation that you live in right now. When that is not happening, it will land on deaf ears.
You study history. Were people wiser in the days before?
Let me tell you first that I can't really compare that, because there was no science of psychology, in ancient Greece. So we can only judge it based on some handful of scripts that may be left over from that time. As societies, we made some advances. Most societies nowadays don't have slavery. That was probably a wise decision. We have better equality for minority groups than even 50 years ago. That is also a wiser decision, because diversity in a society actually promotes open-mindedness in many ways. There is quite a great deal of polarization right now, of course, in terms of people don't seem to see eye to eye. But it's not the case that that is a new phenomenon. Throughout history, there were always periods of great polarization, including in the 19th century. So hard for me to say. I think on the societal level, we are moving in the right direction. At least democratic societies, I think, are moving in the right direction of having wiser societies. We're not there yet. We haven't solved any of the major either geopolitical or ecological problems. In fact, we continue causing them. But we probably do a better job than, let's say, industrialization consumed Europe in the 18th or 19th century, where you couldn't even breathe in London.
Is wisdom a virtue?
In classic Greek philosophy, considered to be the cardinal virtue. In fact, the meta virtue that helps you coordinate between all other virtues, according to Aristotle. I mean, there are different perspectives on that, but if you take a classic Aristotelian viewpoint, for Aristotle, for instance, he would say, like, all right, so anything can be a virtue or a vice. Take anything intellectual or a moral, bravery, for instance. It's great to be brave, but if you're brave in front of a shotgun, that is actually kind of foolish. So you need to really figure out under what circumstances to apply virtue and under what circumstances not to apply virtue. And that's where wisdom comes in. It's knowing how to navigate, how to discern the situations such that, well, in this situation, I should be recognizing limits of my knowledge, which is also a virtue of so-called intellectual humility. So recognizing that your knowledge may be limited. But in this situation, maybe it's not a good idea, because I'm a teacher and this is a elementary school student who never heard about math, maybe. And if he's asking me if 2 plus 2 is actually 6, and I start questioning myself thereafter, that's probably not the wise thing to do.